Good afternoon and welcome to the FT's Business Clinic Live with me, Claer Barrett, the FT's personal finance editor. Well, today, just in time for lunch, we're going to be discussing the launch of Eat Out to Help Out. This was the brainchild of Chancellor Rishi Sunak. Indeed, the whole scheme has become known as Rishi's Dishes. Up to 70,000 restaurants across the UK are offering the scheme, which gives diners a 50% discount on food and soft drinks if they eat in at a restaurant or pub on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday in August. So who better to help me investigate this story than the FT's Andy Bounds, our enterprise editor, who joins me now. Now, Andy, both you and I went out yesterday and tried this scheme. How did you find it?
I found it remarkably relaxing, actually, and that wonderful feeling when you get the bill and you've suddenly gained £35. In my case, I took the family of four, and the idea that you've sort of almost earned £35 while you've been sitting there eating delicious food. I know it's my own tax money coming back to me, but it still felt remarkably good. And the restaurant had done an excellent job. We went to a local South Asian place called the Blue Tiger near us, and they had a one-way system in place. They had tables separated with wooden partitions between them that were all painted nicely with the restaurant colours. They had staff with visors and masks, but it didn't feel like, you might think you might feel like you're in a hospital ward or something, but actually they had done a good job of making it feel like it was hospitality, and it was just like eating out in the good old days, pre-COVID almost. You get certain strange things like, the menu gets handed to you on a tray and you have to take the menu because nobody else can touch the menu. And the drinks, you take them off the tray yourself and put them down because they're trying to minimize contact as much as they can. But it still felt like a nice, pleasant night out. Yeah.
Well,
and it was
certainly
the chance to do it, that arduous reporting trip before this video.
Well, I hope you're going to be claiming that on expenses. But the whole point of this initiative, of course, is to help the hospitality sector in the UK. Now, of all of the numbers of staff to be furloughed, the greatest number, around 1.6 million, were in hotels, accommodation and hospitality, which obviously includes the restaurant and pub business. And many of those workers couldn't come back until the beginning of July, which is when these establishments first started to reopen. Now, the Chancellor's launched this scheme to really give a further boost, because people clearly, from the huge numbers of comments that we've already had on our article from FT readers who are enthusiastic restaurant goers, they're still feeling quite nervous about going indoors to eat. Now, my own experience yesterday of walking around the area of London where I live is that the restaurants who were doing Eat Out to Help Out, who had outdoor seating areas, were absolutely packed. They were the ones that were clearly the most popular with people. There's still a lot of nervousness, Andy, isn't there, about returning to these businesses?
There is indeed, and it's especially a challenge for where I live up in the north of England, because the weather isn't always the best, as people will know. And actually, I was thinking, where do I go that's got outdoor seating? And there aren't so many places as there might be in around London, because you can never be too sure of the weather. So we did go indoors, and as I say, it felt fine for us. It was very busy at 6 o'clock. Apparently, the owner told me, he was full at 6, and then it was a bit quieter at 8 when we went. So it definitely given his business a boost, and people were coming out. But I think, especially age-wise, a lot of hoteliers, a lot of restaurants, chains I spoke to yesterday were saying that the places where young people go tend to be pretty busy. Places that were maybe more aimed at the over 50s, over 60s were quite a bit quieter.
Absolutely. Well, now that we're up and running online, on YouTube and on LinkedIn, if you want to make a comment or ask a question to me and Andy, perhaps you're a restaurant owner or a pub owner, perhaps you're somebody who just, like me, enjoys going to restaurants and pubs, you can comment in the live stream. It will get to me on my iPad. Or if you're watching us in the ft.com article, you can just comment at the bottom of the article. And again, your comment will be picked up and sent through to us. Now, I will start with some of the wide range of comments that we've had from FT readers. First of all, one with a lovely name, Plop, via ft.com, says, why does this only apply to eat-in and not to takeaways? How does it make sense that the government is trying to force us into doing the eating in an unsafe environment? Well, quite a few people have made similar points. FT Reader Tab says it's £10, as in the discount of £10, to enter the virus raffle with a chance to win a spell of post-viral syndrome. And FT Reader It's a Mad World says eat out to help herd immunity. So a few detractors there, but in the main, many people are a lot more positive about the scheme. Personally, says Mick99 via ft.com, I found the whole experience yesterday much better organised than our local supermarket, echoing your comments, Andy, about the sanitising, the thought being put into how menus are passed over and how contact is minimised. I have to say, one of the pubs that I went into yesterday, I was slightly put off upon entering because I had to scan a QR code with my phone in order to sign up for the track and trace system in case there's a future outbreak of the virus. But then, this is just one of many ways in which tech is being used in the restaurant trade now to minimise these sorts of contacts.
Yeah, I think just going back to that point about the takeaways, I mean, the real aim of this scheme is to preserve jobs. And the argument is that obviously if you have waiting staff eating in, then that creates a lot more jobs than takeaway does. A lot of restaurants have pivoted towards takeaways that weren't doing them before and collections and have done really well out of it. But I think this scheme is really aimed at making sure that people are in those restaurants because the fixed cost they have of having a building can't just be covered by by the takeaway and employing the staff. So I understand the arguments against going into places. The virus is still on the go, but it's interesting. We have a greater lockdown in the north of England, as you'll know. So 2 households can't go indoors. You could have a meal together outdoors in a pub garden, but you couldn't eat indoors together. And the reason they brought this lockdown in, they claim, is that there's a lot of mixing within households. And I guess, although one might initially wonder about that, you think, well, if I go to this restaurant, if somebody comes into my house, I'm not wearing a visor, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not wearing gloves, I'm not sanitizing every 2 minutes, every surface. So if the restaurants are doing this correctly, then they should be as safe a place to be as having somebody into your own home, I would have thought.
Okay, well, we've had a plea from FT reader Alan Smithy, who says, can you explain a bit more about the rules? Can you eat out multiple times in a day? My girlfriend is keen, but I'm not sure. Well, the good news for your girlfriend anyway, Alan, is that yes, this is an absolutely unlimited scheme. You don't need to download a voucher. There is a very useful part of the website on gov.uk. We'll tweet the answer, the link out later, but you can just find it by typing eat out to help out into the search engine. If you put in your postcode, it will show you all of the restaurants within a 5 or 10 minute walk around your local area that are offering the scheme. And you can go to them as many as you like on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday, so long as they're open. So it works for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. It even works if you're ordering just like a cup of coffee, but you have to have it in. You can't have it to go. Although, Andy, the place that I went to for lunch yesterday, I mean, it was set up a bit more like a Deliveroo place. It's somewhere that's been popular for takeaways, but nevertheless, there are a couple of long tables for customers to eat in. So I trotted along, walked up to the counter, ordered my food, got the discount, but then they gave everything to me in a takeaway bag, which I had to explain to them after consulting with the friendly guys in the press office at HMRC. Hello, HMRC, if you're listening. Thanks for all of your help before the video, as ever. They've said, no, that's completely against the rules. And another thing that some people are doing, which is also against the rules, is insisting on a minimum spend.
Yes, that's definitely against the rules. And I think on the takeaway question, it's a clear breach. What's interesting is you do have a lot of these sort of kind of outdoor restaurants, especially now, that almost package everything like a takeaway. So you eat everything out the paper. And I guess it's a big temptation for them to just say, off you go, take that home with you. I think it's worth noting for restaurateurs as well that the claim system hasn't quite started yet. So you just need to keep all the receipts and all the discounts you've given. And then the claim system actually kicks in next week. I think it's 7th of August. And you start claiming week by week. And you need to do the claims pretty quickly. But I noticed some restaurateurs I talked to were a bit wondering, how do I actually get this money back, having given you the discount? So that system's not quite up and running. I think it'll all be done online as usual, but it's important to keep a record of how many guests you've served and how much obviously they've spent by keeping the receipts.
Absolutely, and it's only food and drink, non-alcoholic drinks, that are eligible for the discount. Alcoholic drinks, you can't get a discount on, which partly explains why pubs that I went to yesterday were not as busy as restaurants who are offering the scheme. But also the service charge element of any bill in a restaurant isn't included. You can't get the discount on that, but you can get up to £10 per person off the cost of your food and drink. Now, I spoke to a couple of restaurant owners yesterday, one of which was Tim Ciadarton. He is the pasta making genius behind the Italian restaurant Trullo in London, and also the Padella chain. And his restaurant Trullo in North London is now booked solid online Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. If you wanted to go there and get £10 off, then you'll have to turn up and chance your arm, see if you can get one of the tables that they hold back for people who turn up on the day. But he was explaining to me that the capacity, like you say, is 30%, 40% in some restaurants less than what it would be because of all the distancing measures that they've had to put in. So it doesn't take as much effort to get a full restaurant. And also another massive problem for restaurants that accept online bookings is that people just don't turn up sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the no-show campaign has been very prominent. It's understandable because if you're turning people away, as a lot of restaurants now are on a Monday to Wednesday, the idea that somebody wouldn't turn up and therefore that restaurant's going to miss out is pretty poor. And I mean, the least you can do is obviously ring if you have got a particular reason why you don't want to go. Because that's vital for these businesses. They're full. They're basically, I mean, my impression of most of them is, they might make a bit of money on the drinks, depending how much people drink, but the food is really just keeping the place going through August. And of course, the question then is, what happens come September? This scheme runs out at the end of August. If people have gorged out for the whole of August and then decide they don't really want to go to restaurants in September, and we still have a virus in circulation. Sadly, it's just a problem slightly delayed rather than avoided,
And also, of course, for lots of restaurants who pay their rent on a quarterly basis, it's the end of September when that quarter's rent is due. So unfortunately, more cash flow pressures appearing. I'm just going to mention some more comments that are coming in. If you want to make a comment, just do it in the live stream of LinkedIn or of YouTube, or on the bottom of the article if you're watching us on ft.com. Disco via ft.com, a request, he says. Now, I promise I'll send this to Alec Russell, who's the weekend editor. He says, can the FT please publish as soon as possible a guide of all Michelin star restaurants which are participating in Eat Out to help out? A bunch of them seem to be closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, or not open for lunch at all. I work from home, but I still want a decent lunch. Need some options for next week. Well, we can see what we can do for you there, Disco, although fellow reader Shats Cats on ft.com says, well, if you can afford to eat at a Michelin star restaurant, then why bother with the £10 discount? Just go to Burger King or somewhere like that. On Twitter, Sarah Villa Benwell says lots of the local restaurants near her have spread down the pavements outside other shops, offering more tables outdoors, which has helped a bit with capacity, and they seemed fairly booked solid, so fingers crossed. We did a pub last night, she said, which wasn't as busy, but a fair few covers, so it is helping the pubs. And also on Twitter, Ian Devine says, myself and my better half took advantage of the offer last night in Barnes. They were busy, but I suspect the economics are going to be about how much the capacity is reduced due to COVID restrictions. And then another final comment to throw into the mix, Andy, optimistic pessimist on ft.com says people who can afford to eat out probably don't need a £10 subsidy. They've mostly been saving over the past 4 months. It's those who can't afford the food that need the help. In short, it's not very well targeted. Well, the problem of targeting relief has been a continual story throughout the lockdown, and I guess it's no different for these kinds of schemes.
Yes, it's a fair point. Obviously, the better off you are, the more likely you are to be eating out regularly, and there are people out there who can't afford, still using food banks. I guess the Chancellor would say, well, we've tried to give everybody some sort of help, and this is a way to keep a big industry keeping people employed for as long as possible. I mean, there are plenty of people with money. The question is how you lure them out to spend it. And I guess offering a discount, everyone likes a discount. So he's hoping that people who do have the resources will go out and spend, you know, even on those Michelin star restaurants where £10 might not seem much. A lot of the millionaires I've met, you know, they count the pounds as much as the millions, and probably would actually tempt them out. Of course, we should mention that, you know, Pizza Express, there's news today that that's closing 67 outlets. So it shows that this scheme isn't going to save everybody, and especially I think those big city venues, you know, especially the chains. Quite a few people who run chains of restaurants saying the ones in the big city centres are the quietest because you simply don't have the footfall. You don't have the, you know, I think Dan Thomas, our colleague, did a story today saying footfall in London is only up 2% this week compared to last, despite everyone being told to go back into the office, you know, in the City of London. So if you're running a restaurant there, you're going to have a fraction of the custom that you would have done, and it's, you know, not going to help you. I think it's the one in the small towns and the suburbs that will feel the effect of this.
Well, absolutely. And on the city point, you may have noticed, Andy, that my hair is substantially blonder since the last video we did. Now, I managed to get an appointment to get my hair done at a hairdresser in the city, because around here in the suburbs, fully booked up, go back into the city, things are quieter. Maybe that could be of help for anyone looking to take advantage of Eat Out to help out. If you put in the postcode, you may be surprised, frankly, at the number of places in your local area that you'd never heard of. There's certainly quite a few on my list to try out over the coming days. Mick99 via ft.com is in support of your theory, Andy, that the restaurants in places where people live are doing much better than those situated in places where people work. He says our local restaurant, the Giggling Squid, was packed on Monday lunchtime. It definitely seems to be working here in the suburbs. And we also have a very amusing comment from a chap called Michael Pugh on YouTube, who's definitely been doing his bit for the UK economy. He says, yesterday I ate out 3 times with Turkish for breakfast, sushi for lunch and tapas for dinner. I'm helping out so much, I'm basically running a charity here. And we also have a comment from Graham Pack, who says, is this scheme just a way to get furloughed people out of the house when their partner is working from home and treating their furloughed partner like an unpaid servant? Well, Graham, I suspect you know too much about my own home life arrangements, but I have to say I did share the slightly illegal takeaway which I brought home with the husband yesterday. But Andy, this whole point about you know, how restaurants are needing to manage multiple pressures. Obviously, this scheme is a really big help to them, but what they fear more than anything is like the situation in the north of England, where restrictions are being tightened, and even if we could have a second lockdown, that is really the big eventuality which none of them can plan for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty here is as well that the government has done an awful lot to date, but a lot of that's, you know, the grants people have been getting is starting to run out. And is the government prepared to do another round to keep people going through the winter of support through things like furlough, through things like, you know, business rates, VAT cut? Let's not forget that the hospitality sector's had. I mean, I've noticed a lot of businesses haven't passed that on, understandably, so they're making extra margin by keeping the VAT, the 20% difference. All these things are going to end eventually. So I think it's a really big judgment call coming in September, when there probably will be some kind of budget, or maybe at least a comprehensive spending review. You know, is the government prepared to keep the economy going through the winter to avoid, you know, sadly, lots of businesses failing? Or are they going to take the tough decision that, you know, this virus is eventually going to, you know, is not going anywhere? So I think track and trace, you mentioned earlier, is key to that. You know, people might feel a bit annoyed they have to give their details, but, you know, sadly, the only way that any country seems to have managed the virus successfully is exactly that. You know, people being contacted if they've tested positive or been near someone that's tested positive, and agreeing to self-isolate and stop the spread.
Well, we've had a really interesting comment come in from an FT reader called Jancy, who runs 2 hotels in central London. Now, I'm assuming it's a he. He says, I think the goal here with Eat Out to Help Out is not to help the businesses, but to alleviate the paranoia of people who are too scared to come out of lockdown or quarantine, or indeed shielding, which is now over in the UK. He continues, I look after 2 luxury hotels in central London, and things are bad. Basically, all hotels are either closed or are hemorrhaging money, running at 5% occupancy. If travel is not eased between the US, Asia, and most importantly, the Middle East in the next month, then the consequences will be detrimental. When the furlough scheme ends, 90% of staff will simply be cut, and the government must come up with a long-term strategy. COVID is not going away anytime soon, and it's not going to magically disappear. Well, really interesting to hear from you, Jancy. Any other business owners out there who want to get their views across, comment on the bottom of the article or send us a message in LinkedIn and YouTube. We've still got another 7 or 8 minutes on air, which we can use to discuss your comments. But I mean, Andy, really, really tough time for hotels.
Well, that's a voice from the front line, isn't it? I mean, you can't argue with that, sadly. Obviously very exposed to international travellers. I mean, again, I think everything we talk about here, there's a domestic economy which isn't doing brilliantly, but has some demand in it because people are staycationing or staying at home and not travelling. But if you're running a restaurant or hotel that is aimed at high spending foreign visitors, it's going to be really, really tough. And it's hard to replace those with high spending UK visitors because there isn't necessarily the money about. So it's one of those rare moments where probably a B&B in Blackpool is in a better position than a luxury hotel in the centre of London.
And we've got another comment that's come in from GTS666, a reader on ft.com, who says, how much has the government budgeted for this programme? It seems a very inefficient way to assist restaurants, but it's hard to assess without that figure. Could we have possibly spent the money better by investing it in better trace and contact systems and building consumer confidence that way, as well as the UK's actual response capabilities if another flare-up occurs? Well, I mean, we don't know the full numbers yet for the scheme. Obviously, 72,000 different restaurants have signed up, and the use of it is unlimited. So who knows how much will be administrated by HMRC in the coming days and weeks of August. But certainly the concerns about track and trace are shared by many readers today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the boss of HMRC, I think Jim Hanna, he questioned whether this was good value for money at the time and was overruled by the politicians. So it will cost a lot. It's not particularly well targeted. Maybe there is an element of that feel-good factor as well that one of our other readers suggested earlier. Maybe the government thinks, well, if people are going out and eating, they'll feel better about life. It might tempt them out to go and do other things, go to the shops more. So there may be an argument. They're very keen on their nudge behavioural units and sort of trying to get people to do things they didn't really know they wanted to do. So I'm sure it's about more than just money, but it is obviously a short-lived venture. It's only August, and in September we will be back to where we were. So it'll be interesting to see if it's got any legacy effect in terms of people thinking, yes, I've done this a few times, I'm going to keep doing it, or if they just see this as a window of opportunity that's short-lived.
Well, a great question coming from LinkedIn. Hello again to all of the people who are watching us on LinkedIn, from Jay Palmer, and he asks, how do we measure this scheme to be a success? Well, for me, I think it already has been a partial success, because I have, just by going on the website and putting in my postcode, found out about all of these businesses in my local area that I didn't actually know were there. Now, the government website isn't very slick. It doesn't contain websites or phone numbers for these businesses. It just contains the address and the distance from the postcode that you've put in. But I have noticed that a lot of the restaurants around here are using the launch of Eat Out to help out to launch other offers and campaigns and just generally try and get more customers coming through their doors in the local area. All over Instagram, for example, there are people who are using the Eat Out to help out hashtag, and on Twitter. And there are lots of higher end chains who are also coming up with special offers, Andy, in addition to Eat Out to help out, to try and get people back eating out.
Yeah, I mean, I think 80%. Our story yesterday said that 80% of restaurants and pubs that have food have enrolled in the scheme. It's interesting. The other 20% haven't. I wonder what they must be very confident about their pricing. So it's obviously proved popular. It has raised the profile of the sector. I mean, again, looking back at Pizza Express, we were saying before we came on air, it's rare to go to Pizza Express without a discount anyway. And an awful lot of these restaurants were offering this, were surviving on thin margins. And one might argue there were too many restaurants about, especially too many restaurants that look similar, pizza chains, burger chains. And therefore, what we've got is a sort of cyclical decline, probably, where some of these places were going to go anyway, combined with the COVID, a bit like we've seen on the high street. Where you've got two factors at play at the same time. It's hard to disentangle who's going because the restaurant model didn't really work for them, and who's going because of COVID. And I guess at least this Eat Out to help out will, hopefully allow some of those smaller, independent, local restaurants to weather the storm and be there, the other side when maybe there's a bit less competition from the big chains.
Well, indeed, and lots of mixed views, I have to say, on LinkedIn. I'm going to read out some of the comments from LinkedIn now. David S., who's a retired reflexologist, said, "I think it's great to be helping out the restaurant industry. After all, food is the reason why we are still alive and keeps us going." But then an opposing view from Martin Nagari, who is a managing director, he says, "You guys in the UK are wasting your resources. You should be pumping money into renewable energy and other new industries and not bailing out restaurants." The QR codes that we were talking about, these funny squares that you scan with your mobile phone. Karina Market, who's a project manager, says you should use QR codes for the menu so you don't need menu cards anymore. Better for Mother Nature too. Well, perhaps, but a bit fiddly. I find these things. I'm just not really up to date with QR codes. I will try harder, Karina. My natural resistance to them, I'm sure, can be overcome. Mile Hanso via LinkedIn says it's irresponsible and crazy to travel or visit places where lots of people are crowded together. But then Ivan Popov, also on LinkedIn, says corona disease 2% risk of going crazy if in quarantine for longer 100%. Now that does reflect a growing desire of many people to, get back out. Never mind the risks. Frank Bryant says helping restaurants helps the UK economy. Helping the economy helps everybody. And then finally, Christopher Tremaine, again on LinkedIn, says packed out restaurants with the government paying part of the bill, where diners are having a good time, shouting and laughing, but aren't wearing face masks, versus quiet retailers which are being avoided in favour of Amazon, etc., because one is required to wear a face mask inside shops. It seems the wrong way around. However, I am very glad to see the restaurants becoming busy again regardless. Well, Andy, what do you make of those comments?
We have some very well-informed readers, don't we, and watchers. And I mean, you have to agree with a lot of it. I mean, it did seem a bit strange to be able to sit there without a face mask in a room full of other people when you can't go to the shop without one. And I agree that you should have to wear one when you go to the shop. I guess the answer is it's a smaller crowds and there's lots of cleaning going on between. One hopes that the government scientists have signed this off for the right reasons, that there is a low level of transmission. And I do think we are now in a situation where there are divided camps in society. There are those people who think this is incredibly reckless and shouldn't be done, and there are those who are desperate to get out and eat. And I think we do need to accept that everybody has their view of doing things, and one has to stick within the regulations as outlined, and then make your own judgment calls. But everyone will do something slightly different within that, and as a society, we have to accept that if people are staying within the law, then they're staying within the law. on the track and trace system. And I mean, I remember when the announcement was made about doing this, and I did wonder about it, because you sort of felt, well, yes, we need to be investing in the jobs of the future. The man there, or the man or woman who talked about renewable energy, that has to be done as well. I think what the government fears is a mass unemployment over the next year or two, and there's probably an acceptance. But let's hope that we need to move to a different economic model, which isn't just all predicated on consumer spending, but the reality is that's the model we've got at the moment. And they want to keep that consumer spending going while they figure out a way to, to make the economy thrive on other things as well.
And also, in response to the reader who said, I want to go out for lunch, even though I am working from home, I think we're all finding, obviously all of the staff, the majority of the staff at the FT are still working from home, as you can see. Me and Andy are both doing so, and it is nice to break up the day a bit by going out more. And if we're going to be staying in our local areas, for perhaps many months more, as we're discouraged to going back to busy office buildings with problems of lifts and all kinds of things, which our colleague Dan Thomas has been writing about, then maybe that could really help local restaurant businesses through the difficult months ahead of September, October, November, and the lead up to Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. It's all about having a system in which that can be done safely. And we come back to the track and trace. I think the problem with not having the app is, I did a story about an outbreak that had come through pubs in Carlisle, and I must say, I think probably pubs are probably more likely to be spreaders than restaurants. People drinking together late at night in larger groups. But the track and trace information that was given out by people there was, shall we say, far from perfect. I mean, when the local council tried to text people that had been in those pubs, about 20% of the numbers were wrong or false, or just illegibly written. So until we can really solve that, and I guess the app would have helped solve that by, forcing you to say where you were, and also knowing how close you came to people, because you could be in a pub and you could be 10 meters from somebody. And I've only been in there for 15 minutes at the same time with them. So we've got a very broad brush system at the minute that really, really, really desperately quickly needs refining. And hopefully that can happen. I think the aim, they're desperately trying to do that before winter really kicks in.
Well, just to round off with a few more comments from readers which are coming in on Twitter, Martin Wood, who's part of the campaign group Excluded UK, which we have mentioned many times before on these videos, says you cannot participate as an establishment that only offers takeaway food or drink, or if you are a mobile food van or a trailer. More people being excluded from government schemes, crushing small businesses throughout the UK. Well, thanks for getting in touch with us, Martin, to say that. Farhad Ahmed via LinkedIn says, I think the Chancellor has had a difficult decision to make. If he gave cash to everyone, the fabled helicopter money, then the well-off would have had money in their bank accounts, but we can't for years stay at home. So it's a fine balance between saving people from the virus while saving the economy. And then a final one from YouTube, Susan Reed, who's watching us in the US. Hi, Susan. She says, I went out just once during the pandemic. The establishment served beer and everything was one-time single-use plastic. Never again. Well, Susan, I have to say, you do strike a chord with me there, because all of these safety measures that are coming in, as somebody who's been actively trying to reduce and even eliminate some of my use of plastics in the past year, the coronavirus has really put pay to a lot of my efforts. But when it comes to safety and plastic, there doesn't seem to be very much of a choice, does there, Andy?
No, I mean, things like sauce bottles have been turned into single-use sachets. Salt and pepper, has to be single use. So it's real tricky. I mean, you go in the supermarket and what used to be, croissants on open display now have to be wrapped in plastic. It's a terrible irony, isn't it, of this crisis, that plastic has suddenly become ubiquitous, even more than it was before.
Well, the subject for a future video, perhaps. Well, Thank you so much for joining us today. Me, my colleague Andy Bounds, who's the FT's enterprise editor. If you follow either of us on Twitter, I'm at Claer B, Andy is at Andy Bounds. We'll be tweeting out some of the articles that we've mentioned by us and by our colleagues in the course of this video. If you want to watch other videos in the Business Clinic series, you can find them all. They're free to watch on the FT's YouTube channel. Just look up Financial Times or watch online ft.com/business clinic. We will be back next week, Tuesday, 12 o'clock, where I'll be joined by another expert to discuss another topic. And if there's anything that you would like to get in touch with us about that before then you can reach us via email. The best email for me is money@ft.com, where I will read every message that's sent in. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We will see you on the Business Clinic next time. Goodbye.